Bonsoir. Bienvenue au Théâtre du Nord qui nous accueille si généreusement, et je l'en remercie pour nos conférences et nos masterclass. Vous allez vivre, j'en suis sûre, un moment exceptionnel. C'est un moment qu'on attend tous. Moi, je sais déjà que ça sera comme on appelle un highlight du festival. Avoir Brian Cox, qui est un acteur légendaire. Alors vous le connaissez, beaucoup d'entre vous le connaissent bien sûr pour Succession, mais c'est un acteur légendaire, formé au théâtre, c'est un acteur légendaire de cinéma, c'est une personnalité absolument généreuse. Vous allez vivre vraiment une vraie rencontre qui sera animée par la très douée Charlotte Blum ici, qui mérite vos applaudissements. Journaliste et réalisateur. Et sans plus tarder, je vous demande d'accueillir très fort Brian Cox.
Wow.
Well, it's an honor to have you with us.
Well, it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So we are in Théâtre du Nord. We are in a theater, and it's a very small statement to say that theater is vital in your life. It's your whole life. How do you feel when you come in a theater? Do you still have this emotion?
Yeah, I do. For me, the theatre is I'm sorry, I'm not particularly religious, but the theatre for me is the one true church, because it's where we see the human experience. Without all the belief systems, that's part of the human experience, is the belief systems that we have. But the great thing about the theatre is we see man and woman in their naked state. I mean by naked emotionally, naked psychologically. And it's also the celebration of human life. It's who we are as human beings. And that's what I feel is the most important. And it goes right back to Hamlet's advice to the players when he says, "Speak the speech I pray you as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of your players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines." Now in that speech, Hamlet gives the whole reason of why we do what we do, which is to hold the mirror up to nature. And that's the job of the actor. That's his and her position, that they hold the mirror up to nature. And once they've achieved that, then they go on, and they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. And that's really the sort of act of celebration of life, of who we are. And that's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned.
So Shakespeare, like you said, who is also extremely important in your life, in this autobiography that you book, that is very good, if you haven't read it, it's very interesting. You said that you've been told as an actor that to prove yourself in theater, you must do Shakespeare. There's just no way to avoid it. This is where it comes from. Why do you think, what is there in the writing of Shakespeare that is so important?
Well, I think it goes back to what I just said about the fact that Shakespeare does actually say in his advice to the players that what our job is to hold the mirror up to nature. I mean, one of the things I always ask young actors is, why do you want to act? What is the reason for acting? And usually they can't answer, because they're so self-absorbed, and they're so, oh, I just want to express, or I want to do this, or oh, I'd like to just be like that, you know. And you go, that ain't good enough. You've got to really understand why you do it. What is the purpose? And the purpose is, as Shakespeare describes, and that's why Shakespeare is such the great playwright, because you can't get round him, because all the ideas are there. All of the ideas that we've developed over centuries is there, and it's so succinct. And my wife and I have just come back from Washington, where we went to the Folger Library. Now, the Folger family, they were a husband and wife. They didn't have any children, but they collected something like 82 first folios of Shakespeare. And they have the biggest collection in the world. And they were passionate about, I saw their notes, they were passionate about the bard, about Shakespeare, and they wrote so much detail about him. And this was the 400th anniversary of the fact that two actors, Condell and Hemmings, who are players at the Globe with Shakespeare, they took the texts and they annotated them and they had them printed. Nobody had done that. These texts, if it wasn't for these two actors, would have been lost forever. We would never have got Shakespeare as we have him now. And we owe so much to those two men who were actors, who on behalf of their dead friends said, look, you know, we know that he wrote these plays, but we haven't got them extant. We have to get people to, you know, they had to get people to give them their prompt scripts, give them their scripts. I mean, the actors' parts were all individual, so they had to give them the parts so that they could put together the plays. And they really did do the editing. They did the job of getting what we have now of these amazing works of theatre and art. And that's why, you know, it's the actor who's kind of propelled Shakespeare forward. And I believe that that's what we do. That's what we do on stage. That's what being on stage and playing those plays are about, you know, and I think it's vital.
I'd like to show you a clip that I picked that I feel encapsulates everything we've said so far.
Okay.
C'est l'extrait numéro 2, s'il vous plaît.
Dost thou know, Dover? There is a cliff whose high unbending head looks fearfully on the confined deep. Bring me but to the brim of it, and from that place I shall no leading need. Here's the fly tower. If you mount up, take firm a rail in each hand. I'll boost your bum, darling. Here's the place. How fearful and dizzy it is to cast one's eyes so low.
Set me where you stand. Let go my hand.
You are now within a foot.
Line. Lie.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful scene from Deadwood, which I know that you said that only death could keep you from acting. Mm-hmm. This scene seems to resonate with what you say. It's having Shakespeare, King Lear in that case, with you till the last breath. So I thought maybe this scene would resonate with you.
No, absolutely. It was a beautiful scene. It was this dying actor who's literally at the end, and I'm leading them to the end. And it's actually the scene. It's the Duke of Gloucester's scene. It's Gloucester talking to his son, or it's actually the son talking to Gloucester and telling him how it's all right where you're going to go to. And it's so weird. I haven't seen that for, oh God. I did that in 2006, so it's quite a long time ago, nearly 20 years. But the guy, David Milch, who created Deadwood, is probably one of the few geniuses I've ever really worked with. You know, I mean, he's on a par with Jesse Armstrong, who writes Succession. But David is a classicist. He was he was originally a tutor at Yale University, and it was his boss was the American writer Robert Penn Warren, and Robert Penn Warren, the guy Stephen Bochco, who produced oh God, he produced everything. Oh, he did what?
Eastern Blues.
Yes, yes, and he was looking for somebody to write dialogue, and Robert Penn Warren said jokingly, "Well, I've got on my staff one of the best dialogue writers in the country," and that was David Milch. And then he poached David, and David went to work for him, and he did NYPD Blue, and he did the other show, the cop show before that, you know. And David was on that, and that's when he started becoming this extraordinary showrunner and creating these shows. And then Deadwood was the show that was really virtually, I mean, he did something since then, but this is probably the best thing that he really ever did. And it was only ever 3 series, which was sad. In fact, we're sitting, Aubrey Morris, sadly, he's no longer with us, the actor who played the dying actor has gone. And we sat in a replica of the theater that I built, that Langrish built. And in the original show, Langrish was supposed to, that was where Jack McCall, who killed Wild Bill Hickok, was tried. But HBO were a bit nervous about having the theatrical thing. They didn't particularly want it. David wanted it, and you can see why he wanted it. And eventually he got it, which was in the last series, sadly. So I never got to open the theater because we never went to a 4th series. That was not because they didn't want the 4th series, it was because David got into a row with the then head of HBO, and it went away.
But the good news is Deadwood is still one of the best shows. Oh, everybody loves it. It's fantastic.
And I'm exceedingly proud of it. You know, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot to me and my wife because, you know, we'd reached a point where my wife was. We were married, happily married, but I had a green card and she only had a visitor's visa. So David very kindly met her and gave her a role. She played in it, and we were able to stay in LA that much longer because he got her a green card, which was fantastic.
But I think it's a bit of, it's obvious that you work with him because you share this love for language, for words, and I think maybe as an actor, sometimes the text is even more delicious depending on the writer. And to me, you and David Milch, I mean, it ticks.
Thank you for saying that, because I've felt that. I felt that it was sometimes very difficult because I was slightly in awe of David, you know, so it was always very difficult to talk to David because he really has this spark of genius about him. And but it was always about the work. And that's always the best way of communicating with somebody, is you do the job and you do it well, and he goes, oh yeah, that's what I wanted, and that's fine, and we move on.
What I wanted to show with this clip is that sometimes work and life and art meet and you don't know why. It's kind of mysterious.
Well, I understand why, because it's what we do. It's about the celebration of life. The theatre and the TV. I mean, the great thing about TV now is, and particularly if we talk about series mania, the thing about the series is the fact that it has it's really presented long form. Now, the long form, which is by long form, I mean that you watch something over 10 episodes. So you watch 4 series, so you see 40 episodes. So over that time, you get to develop in a way that the theater doesn't give you, or even the cinema doesn't get you, because the cinema is down to the 3-act form, first act, second act, and third act. Well, in television, it's a beginning, an endless middle, and an end. And that, from an actor's point of view, is like gold, because we get to invest in our characters, we get to examine our characters, we get to take the characters on the journey that the writer has asked for, but also our own journey too, about how we develop the character, how we make the character prevalent within the show. And that's the great thing about the long-form television. And it's opened up a whole new door. That's why series MANIA is a very current idea and a very important idea, because we're now moving into a whole new paradigm in terms of how we present dramatic art. And series television has done an enormous amount. Sadly, the theater, the cinema, the theater will always be the theater, that'll be fine, but the cinema is playing catch up. The cinema has lost a lot of its impetus, I think, because we're so involved with superheroes and what have you, and Marvel and DC, that we forget about the simple stories. We don't tell them. And television has taken that over and has run with it, and actually is doing a phenomenal job.
But I think maybe you read my mind, because I had picked a clip that says what you just said, but I'd like to watch it with you anyway.
I'm anticipating everything then, am I?
You are, you're medium. Ça va être l'extrait numéro 7, du coup c'est pas dans l'ordre que je vous ai donné tout à l'heure. Extrait numéro 7, s'il vous plaît.
But a little fantastic and fleeting and out of reach.
Then what happens?
That's the end of the book. I wanted to present it simply, without big character arcs or sensationalizing the story. I wanted to show flowers as God's miracles. I wanted to show that Orly never saw the blooming ghost orchid. It was about disappointment.
I see. That's not a movie. You gotta go back, put in the drama.
I can't go back. I've got pages of false starts and wrong approaches. I'm way past my deadline.
Tell you a secret. The last act makes a film. Wow them in the end, and you got a hit. You can have flaws, problems, but wow them in the end, and you've got a hit. Find an ending, but don't cheat. And don't you dare bring in a deus ex machina. Your characters must change, and the change must come from them. Do that, and you'll be fine.
Good choices. Spike Jonze, the director, and of course Nicolas Cage. Nicolas is a really interesting actor. He's a much better actor than sometimes his work shows, because he does a lot of shit films, you know. So, but he's a really fine actor, and that film, I would recommend anybody to watch Adaptation, because the great thing about Adaptation is how Nicholas acts with himself. I mean, he's amazing. They play twins, they're twin brothers, and he does the most extraordinary things that I just thought, how could he do that? He inhabits the two people in the same scene, and he complements his alter ego, but they're brothers, so he complements them incredibly well. He's astonishing. The other thing about this is that Robert McKee, who I play, that's the character I'm playing. Now, Robert McKee does these great arcs of storytelling. He does this thing called Story, where he talks about the story of the film, and he's got certain rules, and he does these series of masterclasses which are just brilliant, they're dazzling. But it's a sort of love story about Casablanca, because Casablanca is his favorite film, and he uses Casablanca to tell the story. So when Spike Jonze told him that he was in this film, his character was in this film, he was very nervous about it because he thought, oh, maybe you know, they're going to make a fool of me. Maybe they're going to take, you know, they're going to ridicule me. But I assured him that that wasn't going to happen. And then on that day that we filmed that scene, that very scene that you saw, the first assistant came up to Spike and said, oh, finally you have your Obi-Wan Kenobi character. And I told Robert this. I said, you know, you're Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he was so happy. He was just over the moon. He said, oh, what a relief. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm so happy.
You worked with, in cinema, many fantastic directors with David Fincher, Wes Anderson, Michael Mann, Sam Raimi. You've practiced many kind of directors. How much does the director of the movie weight in your decision to say yes or no to a project?
Not nearly enough. No, it's fine. Directors are an interesting animal. I mean, they really are. I fundamentally like them. Fundamentally. But they sometimes have ideas which go beyond the pale. i.e. they go beyond the necessities of the script. That's fine, because you can understand that, but it's a discipline. How to serve, you know, how to serve the script as opposed to how to redirect the script or remotivate the script. And the great directors serve the script. They serve the script. The finest director I've ever worked with in that way is Lindsay Anderson, who was an English director, sadly long gone now. And he made films like If, The Sporting Life, which is a particular favorite film of mine, and also Oh Lucky Man. And they're wonderful films. And he, as a director, was always extraordinary in his understanding of the text and understanding of the actor's relationship to the text. And I first worked with him when I was 23. I played this part of, I played the writer, the English writer David Story. And the film is a really interesting film. It's called In Celebration. We started it, we did it on the stage in '69, and then 5 years later we did it again as a movie. And when I rehearsed the first time, when I did the stage play, it was my first big job in the London theatre. I mean, I'd appeared in the London theatre, I'd made my debut, but I'd never been employed by a London theatre, and this was my first time. And I met Lindsay, and he was incredibly good and kind to me. So I got the job, and my first day's rehearsal, and part of the first day was I had to come in to a house that I hadn't been back to for a number of years, and it was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and I was waiting. I was ahead of the arrival of my two other brothers. I was the youngest brother, and there were two other brothers who arrived in the house. And so the first beat of the play is I come in, the stage is empty, and I go around the room, and I have to, you know, and I did it, and Lindsay said, and again, and then I did it again, and he said, now slower. Don't be so fast. Take the room in. Look at the pictures. Take it all in. And we rehearsed a whole morning on this. And it was literally, in stage time, it was a minute, if that. But when we rehearsed, we did it over 20 minutes doing this whole scene. And then Lindsay said, oh, Brian, don't just do something. Stand there. It's very hard to understand what that means. And what it means is, don't be busy. Don't do it. Allow it to happen. Be the instrument. Receive it and allow it to flow through you. But do it in a way that you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to try and squeeze it. You just allow it to happen. You trust it, and it's about trust. Now, great directors understand that. A lot of directors don't understand the nature of trust because they're controlling, and it's not good to be controlling. Controlling directors for me don't work because they come from the outside. They never come from the inside. They think they do, but they don't. I'll leave it at that.
It's a statement. So a character who goes back to a place he hasn't been for a long time.
Yeah.
So you read my mind again, no problem.
Goodness, really?
I don't know what's going on here. Donc, so we're going to watch a clip. Ce sera, eh bien, à nouveau pas dans le bon ordre. Ce sera l'extrait de Succession saison 2, s'il vous plaît. Succession.
Oh. The bandstand.
What happened there, Pa?
Huh? Oh, different things. Yeah, a lot of, hey.
You and June were lucky to make it out to Canada.
It wasn't such a fucking hootenanny there either. Nah. This place. I look around and I don't know. We came back for when my mother died, but it was all so complicated. You can't explain it. It's not what you think. You look at the old pictures and they all want you to think it's all so fucking simple, but it was, well, it was, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't what they say, you know.
Tell us a story, though.
Story?
Yeah, from back in the day.
Oh, yeah? What, you want a bit about old fucking Rosebud? Rosebud. It's $1 bill. It's whatever it took to get me the fuck out of here.
Good story, Dad.
So Logan Roy was supposed to be Canadian.
Well, he was no. He was supposed to be American, but Jesse Armstrong's sense of geography is somewhat wrong. No, he was. The story is when we started. When I spoke to Jesse, very first time I spoke to him, and Adam McKay, who was the associate producer. And what happened was that I ran, you know, they pitched me the show. Adam McKay was in LA, Jesse was in Italy, and I was in London. And we had this three-way conversation. And they pitched the show to me. And I knew straight away that this was going to be a huge show. I knew it was going to be, I just knew it in my water. I just knew this was going to be a very successful show. So then what happened was that it's funny, I said to Jesse, I said, look, he could be Scots, this character. He could be a Scots character. And Jesse said, oh, no, he's got to be American. He's got to be American. He has to be American. I said, well, okay, he has to be American. But Adam McKay, or as we say in my country, Mackay, Adam Mackay said, I don't think that's a bad idea, Jesse. And Jesse said, no, he has to be American. So the idea of Jesse's American was to set it, to make me come from Canada, which was an odd thing. Quebec, to be precise. So in the very first episode, I'm celebrating my birthday, and we have a toast, and Peter Friedman, who plays Frank, who I'm always firing and rehiring and firing and rehiring, he makes a speech, and he says, born in Quebec, Canada. So that's good. And I thought, well, I'm playing an American. I'm not playing a Canadian. What's going on? I mean, I hadn't got that part of the script, you know, because you're lucky if you get the whole script in one go. But anyway, there it was. So I thought, oh, okay, fine. So he's, you know, he's mid-Atlantic. I'll do a sort of monkey American thing. So I did it. And then on the ninth episode of the first series, we're sitting in East Nor in that house where the wedding, you know, Sinead's wedding takes place with Tom. And I'm sitting there, and Peter Friedman's there, and he said, oh, Brian, I've just done some ADR. Now, ADR it means additional dialogue required, and basically it's syncing, post-syncing. He said, I've just done a post-syncing session, and they've changed your birthplace. And I said, what? He said, they've changed your birthplace. I said, sorry, what do you mean they've changed my birthplace? He said, well, you're no longer born in Quebec. I said, oh, so where am I born? And he said, oh, I can't remember. And he said, oh, hang on. And he got his device out and he went, oh, yeah, somewhere called Dundee, Scotland. And I said, but that's where I was born. And he said, oh, that's a coincidence. And I said, it's a hell of a coincidence. I said, you know, for 9 episodes I've been playing this Yank, you know, and suddenly I'm this Scot from Dundee, I'm a Dundonian. And I said, this is crazy. I mean, really. And this is writers for you. So I go up to Jesse and I said, Jesse, yeah, what's going on? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'm now no longer born in Quebec. I'm now born in my hometown, Dundee. Oh, we thought it'd be a little surprise. I said, it's a hell of a fucking surprise. I said, suddenly after all this, I discovered that I'm no longer American. Anyway, I lived with it and, you know, we converted it into something. But that scene that you just saw is him coming back to Dundee and having all these miserable experiences. Now, the problem was that wasn't my Dundee. That was Logan Roy's Dundee. And it was tough coming back and going, and that bandstand I knew very well. It was a much nicer bandstand from my memory than it was for Logan Roy's memory. So those kind of difficulties threw themselves up, but you just get on with it, you know. You learn the lines and don't bump into the bandstand.
But I suppose this kind of scene where you end up going back to where you were born, but with a film crew, with a series crew, you have to, because it's not the Logan Roy, it's not the obvious Logan Roy.
Well,
he's not screaming, he's not angry.
No.
He's very emotional.
Yeah, I think it's the real Logan Roy. You see, I think he's probably one of the most misunderstood characters in TV. Everybody sees him as this absolutely horrible man. Well, naturally, of course, I don't see that. I mean, the rule number one for an actor, or an actor, by actor I mean both male and female, rule number one is you don't judge your characters. If you do that, you get yourself into all kinds of stickiness. So you just allow the characters to be, and you allow the characters to work your way through you know, as a character. But for Logan, it was very difficult for me because I was a Dundonian. I came from Dundee, and I had my issues with Dundee, which are different from his. But what we see in that scene is his vulnerability. And that he is a very vulnerable character. He realizes that there are certain things in his life that he's lost out on. And his biggest and his real Achilles tendon is that he loves his children. If he didn't love his children, things would be a lot easier for him. But because he loves his children, and look, it's called Succession, and all he's tried to do for, 4 series, is to find a successor within his own family. What's wrong with that? You know, the fact that the family are totally horrible. I mean, that's something else. You know? Well, they're not totally horrible, but you know what I mean.
But when I rewatched the scene, I wondered, as an actor, you have to dig deep into your emotions and sometimes memories. But how do you prevent yourself from getting hurt and going too far into your
discipline? Discipline, of course. You give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and you give unto the other person what's the other person's. I mean, and the writer is one thing, and you know, it would be so easy to kind of go into a memory lane on that scene, but he's struggling. He hasn't. There's no real answer to it. He can't even articulate what his feeling is, and that's his problem. That's Logan's problem throughout. He's not able to articulate what is really deep in him, and he's quite deep. He's a character with enormous reserve, you know, and also mystery, because people don't quite know who he is. They see him and they see what he does and they see how he acts and they go, oh, or not, or they go, you know, some people quite like Logan. Some people actually don't mind him, and some people cannot stand him, you know, oh, that brutal man, that horrible man, that, you know. I can't have anything to do with any of that. I just have to play the part. You know, I just present the guy as I feel he is. And he's ruthless as well, and he has value systems. I mean, the big difference between Logan and I is that Logan is a pessimist. I'm an optimist. I believe things will get better. If we do things right, it will get better. In the world at the moment, human beings are particularly disappointing. You know, and you can see it all the time. You can see what's happening in the Ukraine. You can see what's happening in Iran to the women of Iran and the women of Afghanistan. You can see that the world is not right. And then you can see how we throw up idiots like Donald Trump. How does an idiot like Donald Trump appear on the horizon in the way that he has done in the last 6 or 7 years? Ironically, our first day on Succession was when Trump was elected. So everybody went back to celebrate Hillary's election. I knew it wasn't going to happen, so I didn't go back. I didn't go to the celebrations because I knew it was going to be like a wake. And so that was the background for all those years. That was the background. Trump was the background of what we were doing, you know. And it kind of, it's sort of, there was a cloud that was there that we had to deal with.
We'll go back to Succession a bit later on, but I'd like to show a clip that has nothing to do with Succession. But first, because of what you just said about how difficult the world is, I just wanted to take a second to thank your wife, Nicole Enzeri, for the scarf that she was wearing yesterday that said, life, women, freedom, which is a very important message to,
thank you,
to show.
Thank you. It really is. No.
The scarf is here today.
I'm so proud of my wife. I really am. She's a phenomenal woman. I mean, we have our moments, but well, doesn't any married couple have their moments? But she is, you know, she is an activist, and she is, you know, she's half Iranian. Her wonderful papa passed last year, so it's. What she's been doing is very much in honor of her father, but it's also about the state of the women in Iran, but also the women in Afghanistan. I mean, they are having a terrible, terrible time, and they're being treated really terribly. And it's all part of, hopefully, a dying patriarchy. I mean, I want to see the patriarchy well and truly dead. I really want to see it. We have, you know, for centuries we've suffered at the hands of the patriarchy, and I grew up with women. We've just had the funeral of my wonderful sister on Tuesday. She was 92, and she was the rock in my life. When I was a kid, I lost my mom. Well, I lost my dad, and then I lost my mom to mental illness. So I had nobody, and my eldest sister stepped up, and she took care of me. And she was like my rock, and she was my home. And that was what the matriarchy meant. And it wasn't declared in any way, it was just there. It was there. And I came from a town, my hometown, actually, ironically, in the 19th century, was called She Town, because it was dominated by women workers. and mainly Catholic women workers, women from the Highlands, women from Ireland, where my family all came from originally. And so the matriarchal thing was very strong in my community. So to see how horrible the patriarchy has been, and to realize that it's now time for the women. The women must be taking charge from now on.
Amen. So first off, thank you so much for being here despite of what you're going through.
It's okay.
So I have no transition whatsoever for this next clip. So I'm just going to give the number. It's clip number 3, please. Extrait numéro 3.
That's the same atrocious aftershave you wore in court 3 years ago.
Yeah, I keep getting it for Christmas.
Did you get my card?
I got it, thank you.
And how is Officer Stewart? The one who was first to see my basement.
Stuart's fine.
Emotional problems, I hear. Do you have any problems, Will?
No.
No, of course you don't. I'm glad you came. My callers are mostly clinical psychologists from Cornfield University somewhere. Second-raters, the lot.
Dr. Blum showed me your article on surgical addiction in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry.
And?
Very interesting, even to a layman. I want you to help me, Dr. Lecter.
Yes, I thought so.
It's about Atlanta and Birmingham.
Yes?
You read about it?
In the papers. I don't tear out the articles. I wouldn't want them to think I was dwelling on anything morbid. You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
So there's this, yeah. There is a specific reason why I picked this clip. Of course, you were the very first incarnation of Hannibal Lecter in a movie. This is by Michael Mann. It's Manhunter. And what I love in this scene is that in this movie, and also in Zodiac by David Fincher, and also in the 25th Hour by Spike Lee, your character comes with a voice first, and then we see you. And I know that you've studied at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, where you learned very much how to talk with the solar plexus, how to deal and control the breathing. How do you find, with this experience, the voice of a character?
Well, it's allowing the character to come through. It's allowing the character to make purchase on you. Not you making purchase on the character, but allow the character to make purchase on you, so that when the character comes to you, the voice comes to you. That's a very interesting case in point, Hannibal Lecter. I wanted Lecter to be intellectually smart, but I didn't want to be demonstrative. I wanted to be intellectual and have a, but therefore within that intellectual being there is this danger, this, and I watched films, I was, as a little boy, there was a guy in Scotland called Peter Manuel, and he was probably the first mass murderer I had ever come across. And he was actually Scottish, but he was of Portuguese origin. And his brother used to sell the newspapers on Buchanan Street in Glasgow. And Peter was he was a psychopath. I mean, he was a psychotic, actually, and a psychopath. And he had, there was this paper called the Sunday Pictorial, which I wasn't allowed to read because I was too young, and my uncle had it, and he used to hide it under the cushion, and I would get it and read it. And Manuel was doing these horrible killings, but he conducted his own defense, and he nearly persuaded the jury that the person whose family he murdered, the father had actually arranged for the murder. And it was, of course, a lie, it wasn't true. But he had this fierce intellect. And it was the intellect that was at work. So I realized that Lecter had to have this intellect and have the voice of this intellect, which was clarity of purpose. And he knew exactly what he's doing. There's a scene later on where he tries to get his telephone number, and he says he's lost the use of his hands. I mean, it's a brilliant scene. But it shows this sort of cunning of Lecter and the cunning of that kind of criminal mind that he has. And it was a wonderful thing to be part of. And then, of course, they made Silence of the Lambs many years later. And ironically, the only way I could see Silence of the Lambs, because it was a bit difficult for me to go and see Silence of the Lambs, as I had already played the role, I actually saw it in Paris. That's what I saw. Yeah, I saw it in Paris. I thought, oh, Silence of the Lambs on. Nobody will know I'm here, so I'll go and see it. So I went to see it. And, it's great, and Tony is great. But his take on it is so entirely different from my take on it. But it also shows you that great roles are open to all kinds of interpretations. Nobody's got the, as it were, the sanction of how to play a role. It's there. I chose one thing. The voice is very important to me, and it happened when I was 16. I was at Dundee Rep, which was my local repertory theatre, and I started there. If you buy the book, by the way, it's all in the book.
A very good book.
I started there, and what happened was that the guy who was the director of the theatre at that time, and ironically, he's the guy, he's called Bill Davis, and he plays the smoking man in the X-Files. You know the smoking man? He plays that. Anyway, Bill said, oh, Brian, we're going to have a voice class tomorrow. And I went, yeah, okay. And he said, yeah, would you like to come? And I went, and I had no idea what a voice class was. I was 16. I was completely clueless. And he said, yes, there's this young Scotswoman called Kristen Linklater. She was a student at LAMDA, which is where I eventually ended up to. And she's now a voice teacher. She's the principal voice teacher. So Kristen arrived, and I went into this class, and it's all about centering the voice, the solar plexus, breathing, this channel that mustn't be squeezed in any way. And it's the fact that you talk from here and it goes through the chords without that. Because when you get that, you get tension and it all goes wrong. And she did this, and it was like extraordinary. It was the most extraordinary effect at that time that I'd ever had. So I realized that this is where I wanted to go and study, which is where this woman was. And I auditioned at LAMDA. I got in. But ironically, Kristen left 6 weeks after I got to LAMDA. She was gone. But that was amazing, and that's why I've always valued the voice. The voice is, and I learned that very early on. It's the instrument that works. And also I do a lot of radio, and we still do radio drama. They don't do it in the US. They now do a thing called podcast. It's very interesting how podcast is really radio dressed up with another name, And you get these podcasts, and I've thought, well, we've done that for years. I did a radio series for 12 years in the UK about an Edinburgh detective, and I love the radio because it's just you and the voice. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to wear makeup. You don't have to learn your lines. It's all there, and you just do it, and it's great.
Before my next question, there is one podcast series that you did that I really enjoyed. So if you want to listen to Brian Cox's voice, it's called From Now. Oh. It's science fiction podcast series that you made. Right. Where you play a Scottish man, actually.
Yeah, I do. Is that the twins?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a really great podcast series. So there you go, From Now. So earlier you talked about television being a very long second act, but we are slowly getting to the third act of Succession, which we will miss like hell. I don't know about you, but we will. And what's very interesting today is that Succession started here in Series Mania 5 years ago on stage.
Yeah,
you were with Jesse Armstrong and Ian Abbas and our queen Laurence Herzberg on stage. So how does it feel to finish this cycle where it started with us here?
Well, I think, Laurence has been asking me for some time to try and come, and it's been very, very difficult. But I was determined to try and make this because it was the completion, where we started, and it was the first time it was ever shown. And I just thought it would be great to come back and finish here, so there's a sense. We actually do the premiere in New York on Monday night, so there's a big premiere happening then. But I'm just so happy to get back here, and I think Laurence has done a fantastic job. I really do. I think Series Mania is a really, really original idea, and it's an idea because television is so important now. It will burgeon and it will get better, and more people will be coming from abroad, from other parts of the world, as it's happening now. We've got some Canadians. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic thing.
And like you said, the best writers today on television, we talked about David Milch and Jesse Armstrong, but David Simon, David Benioff, Vince Gilligan.
They're all magnificent, and and television's liberating for the writer. I talk about how it liberates the actor, but it liberates the writer even more, because they've got more time to tell their story and to take the time to tell the story, which is a good thing,
But when you have writing that is so high level, like in Succession, do you have time or needs, or do you want to do a little bit of improvisation? Because you know these characters so well.
There is always an element of improvisation, but it's like the meat of the sandwich is the thing that you see, and the bread is the improvisation. So we sometimes put bread around the sandwich in order to make that taste a little bit better, and then we cut the bread and you just see the meat, and it works. It works like a dream. We're very blessed with those scripts. You can't do it without the work, the writing, and the writing is consistent. That's why I completely empathize and sympathize with Jesse coming to the end of the show, because he's done it now since 2014, and he does that show all the time. He's not got any time to do anything else. So I think now he's feeling that he wants to liberate himself. I think it's hard for him because he lives in London, so he has to constantly come to America. And I think he's got to a point where he just wants to move on, like we all do at times. I'll be sad to lose the people I've worked with, but Logan will always be there. He's not going to go away, and it's been a great gift to play Logan. It really has. It's been one of the great roles for my career, certainly. There's no question. And it would be foolish or churlish of me to try and deny that, but no, it's been a wonderful role, and it's given me great variety, as we see with that scene in the car. I've forgotten that scene in the car, and I realized that there are moments. That's why I think that there is something tragic about Logan, and I think, and you don't play that. That would be, you don't attitudinize that. You allow that to be, you allow that to take, or not. If the audience don't get it, fine. But there's something in him that's unrealized. There's something in him that hasn't worked. And he doesn't even know, he can't even get what it is anymore. I think that Logan is very much like the disillusioned romantic. The disillusioned romantic generally, well, not generally, they do become cynical. They do become a cynic. And I think Logan is become so deeply cynical about his life, about his children, about everything else. But he won't give up. He will fight to the end.
So talking about the future now, you've directed a lot of theater. You've directed an episode of one of my favorite shows ever, which is Oz, in season 4. Is directing in your temptation list?
Well, I'm hoping, touch, is that wood?
Let's say it is.
No, it's not wood. I'm hoping to direct my first movie this year. It's a movie written by this man, actually I've done a lot of radio with over the years, called David Ashton. And it's a film about a family it's set in Scotland, and it's about a distillery. And it's about two brothers, primarily. There are lots of other characters as well, but the main dramatis persona, these two brothers. The older brother stayed behind and reworked the distillery, and it became very, very successful. The younger brother was the real artist. He was the master distiller at the age of 18. He had this real skill, but also his mother was very unhappy with her life, and she sort of visited upon him. So he left. He had a row with his father, and he left. He went to America like 35 years before, and he hasn't been back to Scotland. He's completely destroyed his character, his Scottish character. And the brother, I've sent him a letter to see if he will come back, because I'm going through a crisis. And he refuses. His daughter, then kidnaps him virtually and puts him on a plane and brings him to Scotland. And then the film takes on from there. It's a good script.
It is. And so maybe this summer.
If I can cast my leading actor. It's so hard to cast actor. I mean, I'll give you an example. I won't say who it is, because that would be wrong. But I asked a few people, I inquired about a few people, and a lot of actors of a certain age are recovering alcoholics. And therefore, they can't go near a distillery because of the smell. So that's made it very difficult. So I thought, Jesus Christ, why did I have to have it in a distillery? Couldn't have been a jam factory or something like that. But no, it's a distillery, and of course it is about, it's about Scotch. It is about jusqu'au, the water of life, as we call it in Scotland. And so it's kind of bizarre, really.
Okay, so we won't ask who it was.
No, you won't ask, because there are many of them.
I wanted to show one last clip that, again, I feel encapsulates many things about you, which is the love of theater and Shakespeare and the love of words, transmission, patience. It's going to be le clip numéro 1, s'il vous plaît.
To be.
To be.
Or not to be.
Or not to be.
Okay. To be or not to be. Say it.
To be.
Or not to be.
Or not to be.
That is the question.
Yeah.
That is the question.
Yeah.
I know it's... say to be or not to be. That is the question.
Yeah,
That is the question. That's it. Can you say that is the question?
That is the question.
That's right. So you go to be.
To be.
Or not to be.
Or not to be.
That is the question.
That is the question.
Yes. That's good. That's good. To be or not to be. That is the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say it. You say it. To be.
Or not to be. That is the
Question. That's very good.
And this is so good.
Yeah. Do you want to know some more?
Yeah.
Okay. Whether. Now this is hard. Well, 'tis nobler in the mind. Okay. Whether.
Whether.
'Tis nobler in the mind. The mind. To suffer.
To suffer.
The slings and arrows.
The slings and
Arrows of outrageous fortune.
Of outrageous fortune.
Okay. So, to be or not to be?
To be or not to be?
That is the question.
That is the question.
Whether 'tis nobler in the mind.
No.
To suffer the slings.
It's all the sin.
Of outrageous fortune.
Of outrageous fortune.
Or to take arms.
Or to take arms.
Against a sea of troubles.
against the sea of troubles.
And by opposing,
And by opposing,
end them.
end them.
Very good.
Where are your method actors now? You see, look at him. Theo, 2.5 he was, 2.5. And there's a moment when he does the slings and arrows and he just, and that's him. I didn't do that, he did it. And, you know, they go on about research. Child doesn't research. He doesn't go and say, well, what is this character's background? What do I do? He does it. And he does it in a way that is true and pure and right. And that's there forever, that clip. And I'm so proud of it because child actors I find really, you know, I've worked with a lot of child actors over the years, and they're sometimes the best actors I've ever worked with because they're untroubled by things. They don't get things in the way. They can just do it in a very simple, they have a very simple, direct thing. And then they come up with the most extraordinary things like, to be or not to be, that is the question. He goes, it is, you know, yeah. And you think, is there something profound in this child? That he really understands that really is the question, you know. And he did it. He said, yeah, it is. And you go, wow, where is that coming from? And it's the mystery, you know. It's about the mystery. And children inhabit that mystery and present that mystery in the way that Theo does so wonderfully in that clip. And I'm very proud of that because, and thank you for choosing it, because it really does represent what I believe in. You know, what I believe in, that, you know, you can talk about your method, your systems, all your, you know, stuff about acting. But when you go to that, it's pure, it's simple, it's there. Of course, you have to, there's a further way you have to go and make them understand the, you know, the whole substance of what that's about. But somehow or other, he gets something so pure that it's just, it's touching, it's warming to the heart, you know, to see a 2.5-year-old do that. I mean, how many 2.5-year-olds do you know who could do that? You know? He's now, it's a long time ago, he's now, I think he's about to be 14. So he's, and he goes back to that and he says, I don't know how I did that all those years ago.
Maybe he had a good teacher.
What?
Maybe he had a good teacher.
Oh, maybe he did, who knows?
So it's going to be time for me to give a voice to the audience with questions. So if you have questions, don't be shy. It's once in your life that Brian Cox is going to be in front of you. Raise your hands. And those lovely people are going to give you mics. Raise very high the hands because we can't see much.
Well, you can stand up, actually.
Or stand up.
Don't be shy. There we go.
Hello, my name is Daniel Yin from Taiwan, and thank you so much for sharing the whole experience. My question is, what's the most challenging character from your whole career, and how do you close the character? And the second question...
Are you saying the most difficult character to play?
Yeah.
There's a character I played in Rob Roy called qu'il, and he was a part that I had real difficulty with because he was such a horrible man. You know, he truly was a horrible man. But he was like a fallen angel. I couldn't find my way into him, and then I realized that he had this quality of a fallen angel. You know, somebody who's been kicked out of paradise and found nothing. You know, he's been left as a sort of stray. You know, and that was a great revelation to me because I thought, how do I get this guy? He's so repellent. He's so everything. And I couldn't think, well, he is the fallen angel. He is that, you know, the one that God said, get out. You're no good. You can't do it. You know, go down to the St. Nick and be with him. And I think that's what's really been, hello. Is that for me? Could be my agent. trying to track me down. He does that. So anyway, you know, and that was what was difficult. That role was really a hard role to play because I had to find my way into it. And I did by realizing that, taking that image of the fallen angel and what the ramifications of that were.
Peut-être l'éteindre, non, le téléphone? Ce serait sympa. Merci.
Sorry. So another question is, when you're working with the young directors, and how actually the communication or like the cooperation relationship with the director, how you build the trust, and how actually, if the director doesn't know what he's doing, how how you gonna like work with the director?
There's a wonderful expression of Sam Goldwyn, which is "include me out," and that helps a lot. Oh yes. What the fuck is he talking about? Sure, yeah, of course. Jesus, what a fucking stupid idea. Absolutely, yes. No, you're right. I can see that working. What a fucking dinbat this guy is. No, but I can see it. Well, no, thank you. That's good. I'll do that. That's fine. Yes, no, I will. No, I will. I will do it. Yes, it'll be done. Thank you. Oh, it's exhausting. Next question. The guy in front. Pass him the mic. There you go.
Thank you. So, I have a question about succession. In the real life, which one of your 4 children in the show would you rather like to have in the real life? So, which one between Shiv, Roman, Kendall, and Connor?
Sorry, you mean as their characters or as their persons?
No, the characters.
None of them. No, I mean, they're truly spoilt to fuck. They really are. Oh, I mean, the only person I actually have I mean, I quite like Roman, but he's got a potty mouth, which has got him into all kinds of problems. But I've also got a rather sort of fondness for my eldest son, Connor, who's a sort of sad figure in many ways, and I can see that he's beyond the pale, you know, the idea that he wants to run for president. Oh, for God's sake, you know. But, you know, Trump, you know, we've had worse presidents, I tell you. So, no, it's hard, you know, in real life, forget it.
I understand.
Hello? Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Where are you?
I am here. Sorry.
Where?
Here.
Oh.
Hi. I know you attracted to theater world and complex and profound, and I wondered what's attracted to you to maybe more superficial or more light world, like in Troy or X-Men, so in blockbusters, which are not known to be the most well-written, or more like it's not Shakespearean, to say more.
Well, they're great roles. Again, good roles. I mean, and again, they've got great sort of backstories. You know, Stryker is a very interesting character because he's, again, a man of huge disappointment, and he has this child who is, you know, virtually a vegetable, you know. And that's kind of his MO. That's what sort of motivated him in terms of his life. And what was the other character you mentioned? Sorry.
In Troy.
In Troy. Well, Agamemnon is, you know, super sort of vain and thinks he knows it all. And of course, he is full of bluff and full of, but he hasn't got it right. You know, he hasn't got it right. And the whole siege of Troy was a huge, huge mistake. I mean, they succeeded in the end, but it took a very, very long time. And I was a bit, I like Troy. I think it's and I think David Benioff did a very good shot at it, you know, writing it. But I like the Homer's Iliad. I think the Iliad is more interesting than what we did because of the notion of the gods, but also the notion of the complicated way that the intertwining of both the Greeks and the Trojans. I mean, it's such a brilliant book. And I went back to that in order to prep. But of course, I don't get killed by Rose Byrne. I get killed by Clytemnestra in reality. So it was a great role. And it's the only role that I've actually campaigned for. I've never done that for a part. I've never gone after a part. But I knew that part was going up for grabs, and I thought I could play that part. I know how to play that part. So I went for it. I went for the role, and luckily enough, I got it.
And you were really good. I really liked it. So I got the last chance to say, how was it what was your experience in Troy? Because I really liked the movie, and I got the chance to ask you what was the shooting.
It was a great cast, you know, and I mean, it was wonderful because Brad Pitt, who is a really, really nice man and very modest. He's a very modest man, and his passion is architecture. You know, I think he would like to be an architect. And I've watched him grow over the years and become a really very fine actor. And he was very nervous about Troy because, you know, all the actors like Peter O'Toole, myself, my great friends Nigel Terry and John Shrapnel, who sadly are no longer with us, we're all used to that, wearing those costumes. It's so, you know, it's second nature to us because we do the classical theater. Brad had none of that experience, so when he put the black leather on, I mean, he was kind of, you know, he was sort of taken aback by it. But everybody else was going, "Oh my God, Jesus Christ, look at him! I mean, he's so beautiful, you know." And I kept saying to Wolfgang Petersen, I kept saying, he doesn't have to say a thing. He just has to stand there and look like that. That's all he has to do. He's just stunning, you know. And but he did say he was great. It was a very, very good experience. And of course, it was a great experience for me to get to my first day on that film. This is a really interesting story. My first thing I had to do was to kill Peter O'Toole. That was the first thing I had to stab him in the back. And we did it at Shepperton Studios. And I sat for the whole day waiting to do this thing. And I was dealing with my nerves, going, "It's Peter O'Toole, Brian, it's Peter O'Toole. I know it's Peter O'Toole. You keep telling me it's Peter O'Toole, but what are you going to do? It's Peter O'Toole." I said, I'll be fine, I'll be okay. I'll say, "Hello, Mr. O'Toole, it's so nice to meet you. I've long been an admirer of your amazing career." And I said, "I just don't know what to say, you know." So anyway, we get on, and there's a problem with this effect. I have to stab him, and this thing comes out the front of it. Well, they spent ages getting the effect first. And then finally, we did the scene. Right at the end of the day, we did this scene, and I came on, and I thought I was very in control. I did the scene. And then he looked at me, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "And how are your nerves now?" I must have blown it because he was totally aware of my state, and he was extraordinary. It was one of the great thrills to just spend those minutes with Peter O'Toole.
And here,
hi.
You're right. Hi.
Hi.
What do you think of social medias and discussions about your characters, especially with characters like Logan Roy, which are today pop culture figures? What do you think of that, of memes, of clips extracted from your work?
I mean, it's part of the current thing, you know, you just have to accept it. I'm not a big fan of social media. I think a lot of social media is very irresponsible. And it's also a lot of people jerking off, quite frankly. You know, and I find that a little bit just repellent. But it's also understandable. I know people, you know, it's incredible how this device has taken over our lives. You cannot go anywhere without somebody having a phone, I mean, or dozens of people having a phone. So it's just one has to accept that it is of the time and just accept it and say, well, that's what we have to deal with. they always get it wrong. I'm constantly being misquoted. I'm constantly saying things that I never said. But that's people, they think I'm Logan Roy, so they say, oh, well, Logan Roy would say this. Well, it's Brian Cox, and I didn't quite say that, you know, what you think. So that's always a problem, but you live with it, you know. It's part of the, you know, it's the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Yeah.
Hello. No.
Hello, where are you?
Yeah, here.
Oh, hi, hi.
Yeah, thank you.
Listen, it would help if you stand up, because I can't hear you.
I can stand up if you want.
Okay. Hi, hi.
Thank you very much for your inspiring talk. My question is, do you still have doubts about your work during shooting? And if you have, how do you deal with them? Thank you.
I think as I've got older, I have less doubts, because it's too late to fix it. So in one sense, I mean, it's never too late to fix it, of course not. But I don't have the same doubts I had when I was younger. It's ironic, because it was my sister's funeral, as I said, and somebody sent a video of me visiting my sister's and her family way back in 1991. And when I saw this thing, it was like a different animal. It wasn't the animal. It was an animal. I think I'd been through a sort of breakup at that point, so might have colored it. But there was an element of me which was so introspective, and I thought, wow, I'd forgotten about that state. I'd forgotten about that sense of diffidence that I had about, you know, I'm kind of not inhibited, but kind of overly cautious in a way. I don't give a fuck now. I really don't. You know, I've got to an age now where you can throw any shit you want at me, and I'll just take it and sweep it away. You know, but I really don't. You know, the end is nearer than the beginning, and when you know the end is nearer than the beginning, you just say fuck it and do your job. And I do my job no matter what. That's, as long as I'm not impeded from doing my job, I'm very happy. And of course, I have opinions, and people will always disagree with me. You know, people say, you don't live in Scotland, what are you talking about? You don't live in Scotland, you live in Brooklyn, what are you doing? Well, I go, I spend a lot of time going to Scotland, but I'm not going to explain it to some asshole, you know, how much time I spend going home. I do actually go, oh yeah, I go home quite a lot, you know. Bugger it, you know, that's what they think, let them think it. So I really feel that now. I just feel, and it's very liberating. I like being older. I really like, because it's actually liberated me in a way that I was so busy kind of playing the percentages when I was younger. I don't have to do that anymore. Thank fuck. Sorry about the swearing, but that's Logan Roy. I mean, I tell you, my wife will tell you, I used to be so pure. I was so pure in my language, but Logan Roy is really me.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
I'm over here, yes. So thank you again, and this is sort of on topic. So you speak about being old and how things have changed for you over your career and what you've learned. What advice might you offer to a young actor who has very little understanding of maybe where they're going or how to get there?
Well, just remember why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the problem is, and that's what I go back to right at the beginning, that you do it for self-aggrandizing reasons. And that feeds you to a certain extent. But as I say, I believe it's a kind of church, what we do in the theatre or television or wherever we do. So, and I do think that we're celebrants at the mass of life, if you want to put it that way, in the religious terms. And I do think you have to understand why you do it. We get caught up in our own ego and our own sense of, oh, I feel I can offer this to the world. But what you really have to establish, what is it you're offering to the world and why you're offering it to the world. And I think that's important for a young actor to do, for any actor to do, because otherwise it gives you a sense of perspective about what it's like, because it's such an amorphous profession, and it's a profession that can lead you into all kinds of cul-de-sacs if you're not very careful. But if you keep your eye on the ball and say, this is why I'm doing this job, this is what this job means to me, then it'll work. Then it'll work for you if you serve it that way. But if you want to serve it in a sort of egotistical way, it will never work. And that's what you have to do. You have to be pure of thought in terms of your relationship to who you are within the work. You don't have to blast it to everybody, but you have to know it. And you have to be truthful to yourself. You know, and that's the toughest thing. Don't fool yourself. It's so easy to do in our profession. You know, what? And give up show business? You know, all that kind of stuff. So you really have to work hard on why you do what you do and understand why you do what you do. And then just get on with it. Once you've established that. Once that's established within you, you'll be fine. But if you haven't come to that reconcilement, you're in deep doo-dah.
I'm sorry to say we have time for maybe 2 questions, so think well.
There's 2 down here at the, oh, okay, bye.
Hi. I would like to know if you believe there is a thin line when acting between the state when you go too deep in your character and stepping this line could you could go lost in it, and a line where you stay detached from the character but you could not there is emotion you risk to not tell the people when you're acting. Do you think there is this thin line? Well, a great actor and a great actor has to go beyond that line? Thank you.
There is a thin line, and I think you have to be careful about. I mean, we have cultural differences. It's very interesting. There's a very good book which I urge anybody who's an acting student here. There's a very good book by a man called Isaac Butler. It's called The Method, or How America Learned to Act. And it's a really good book because it deals with Stanislavski and how Stanislavski came through his teachings and through the Russians who left during the early Stalin period, and how the group theater under Lee Strasberg and Shellcroft and Bobby Lewis adopted what he then called the method, which was originally called the system. And they had this dispute, and the dispute was, what about effective memory or emotional memory, which is was one of the tenets of the Stanislavski teaching. And Stella Adler, who was a great teacher, and also her father ran the Yiddish theater in New York, and her brother was also an actor, Luther Adler as well, and they were a very established Yiddish theatrical family. And she was questioning it. She was thinking there was something not quite right. So she took herself to Paris. She found out that Stanislavski was in Paris, and he was living in the Bois de Boulogne, and she went to see him there. And she asked him this question. She said, what about emotional memory, or as you call it, effective memory? And he said, oh, I got rid of that years ago. He said, because it gets in the way of the imagination. And the imagination is the prime thing for the actor, for the creator, for the writer, for anybody, the director. It's the imagination. And if you get in the way of the imagination, you start subjugating yourself in a certain kind of way. And this happens more and more. And part of the American thing is, and in the book there's a very good, he was an assistant to Stanislavski called Richard Boleslavski, who was Polish, actually. And he directed a few films. He died at an early age, but he said a very interesting thing. He said, the problem with America is it's all about the pursuit of the individual. So it's all about individualism. It's not about community. And theater is ostensibly about community. It's how we relate to the community, how we present to the community. The individual is so busy with their own agenda that they forget about the ensemble and how important the ensemble is. And this happens with American actors because they have a lot of habits that are built up, and there's a great fashion. When she went back to America, and they were all finding, what did Stanislavski say? What was the great master say? And she told them, well, he got rid of effective memory or emotional memory because he felt it got in the way of the imagination. Lee Strasberg stood up and said, then Stanislavski is wrong. Stanislavski is right. He's not wrong at all. He's absolutely right. It's about how you are in control of what you do. And it's also about your responsibility to the ensemble. If you're so busy playing your part and feeling your part, you're not actually taking part in the community element of it. You have to do that as an actor to a certain extent. You've got to do it. It's important that you do it. But at the same time, you mustn't allow it to become the raison d'etre of why you do what you do. And some young actors make it the raison d'etre of why they do what they do. And it's a kind of difficulty. I mean, it's very, you know, it's a big contentious issue. I mean, the work is the work, and it's great. And some of these young actors who do that are fantastic actors. I don't deny their talent at all. But there's another thing at work, is the ensemble, is the group. Succession would not work if we didn't have the best, or one of the best ensembles on television. You know, those actors are fantastic in terms of how they relate to one another. And if somebody doesn't relate to one another, we then let them know it. In no uncertain terms.
I'm very sorry to say we have to stop now.
Oh, thank you.